Chernobyl. We've all heard of the worst civil nuclear disaster in history. But most of our knowledge stops at a poorly handled nuclear power plant that melted down and caused a lot of problems. So, let's learn some more, shall we? Beginning its construction in 1972, Ukraine's first nuclear power plant, the third in the whole of the USSR, was slated to be operational by the late 1970s, with its first erbium K1000, I'll explain later, reactor coming online in 1977, the appropriately named Reactor Number 1. 1 year later, this was followed by Reactor Number 2 in 1978, Reactor Number 3 in 1981, and Reactor Number 4 in 1983. Plans for Reactors 5 and 6 were planned additions to the Chernobyl site. Reactor Number 5 being almost completed before disaster struck on April 26, 1986. Needless to say, they were never finished. But we are not here to talk about the entire history of Chernobyl, as interesting as it is. We are here to talk about one moment in particular. We are here to talk about the infamous Chernobyl disaster, the Reactor Number 4 meltdown. But before we talk about that, we need to talk about erbium K1000 nuclear reactors, like I said I would before. They're a solid fuel nuclear reactor capable of producing thousands of megawatt hours of energy. What in the ever-living hell is a solid fuel reactor, you may ask? Well, it's a nuclear reactor that uses solid uranium fuel rods. It's a nuclear reactor that uses solid fuel. It's a solid fuel reactor. erbium K1000 reactors, like most other reactor types, use control rods to control the nuclear reaction. Their entire purpose is to absorb neutrons and slow down the... I need to explain how nuclear energy is made, don't I? Okay. Nuclear energy. Way oversimplified. Uranium-235 is the only fissile material that is even moderately easy to obtain. Fissile means that it can undergo nuclear fission, and I need to explain nuclear fission now too. Okay. Nuclear fission is one of two types of nuclear reactions. Fission, fusion. You can completely forget about fusion for now. Might make a video all about that later. I probably won't, but for now, all you need to know is fission, because that's how all nuclear power plants work as of now. Uranium-235 is a very rare fissile isotope of uranium. When hit with a neutron, it becomes the incredibly unstable uranium-236, which immediately splits or decays into one barium-144 atom and one krypton-89 atom. Oh, you might be thinking, 144 and 89 only add up to 233. What happened to the other three? Well, the fission reaction also produces 3 neutrons, making 236. Those 3 neutrons can then hit 3 more uranium-235 atoms, turning them into uranium-236 atoms and starting a massive runaway chain reaction. The way that this produces energy is by friction. The atoms and the neutrons smash into each other and the water coolant, which creates heat that turns the coolant into steam and runs a turbine, which makes energy. Yes, water coolant. It's actually way more important than you might think, but I'll get to that. Just hold on a minute. Okay, that's fission and how energy is made in nuclear reactors. Time to finally get back to the design of the erbium K1000 reactors, right? Right, okay. Back to control rods. They are made of a neutron-absorbing material. This, as the name implies, absorbs some of the neutrons released by the fission reaction and slows down said reaction. If you retract the control rods, less neutrons are absorbed, so the reaction speeds up. Drop them all down, and the reactor shuts down. In theory. The control rods at Chernobyl were made primarily of silver and iridium, which both absorb neutrons. They were tipped, however, with graphite, a neutron multiplier. It was only a small amount of graphite, though, so it wasn't enough to cause many problems. An additional way of helping the reactor not explode is the coolant. In this case, it was regular old H2O, water, which is a decent neutron absorber as well. These two factors combine to make the reactors safe, able to use the 211 control rods at Chernobyl to have fine control over the reaction. But how is that different from a nuclear bomb? Well, my friend, because neutrons. There are fast neutrons and there are slow neutrons. All you need to know is fast neutrons get released immediately when fissile material undergoes fission, where slow neutrons are released a couple milliseconds later. Nuclear bombs make use of fast neutrons, making the chain reaction as quickly and uncontrollably as possible. Reactors make use of slow neutrons, making a slightly calmer reaction that can be controlled with the aforementioned control rods. Now, coolant is really useful in this aspect, used as a neutron moderator. Liquid gets in the way and impedes the fast neutrons quite effectively. As long as it doesn't turn into steam, then the particles would be too dispersed to effectively moderate the reaction, speeding it up and building pressure in a reactor until it explodes. But no well-maintained and well-staffed reactor would ever do that. So let's move on to the disaster itself. On April 26, 1986, the staff at Chernobyl had been running at low power output for a while. This led to something called xenon poisoning. It's where xenon builds up and impedes reactor efficiency. Just look it up, man, I'm tired. They then went ahead with a safety test to see if everything was safe. This was a routine, pre-planned test. During the test, the reactor output dipped to near 0% efficiency due to the xenon poisoning. Not wanting to fail the test again, yes, again, the Chernobyl higher-ups ordered the raising of more control rods, more than was safe during any operating conditions. The xenon burned away, reactor output spiked dramatically. It was several times higher than maximum safe output. Panic, fear. Unthinking, they pressed the reactor shutdown. This slams all of the control rods into the reactor, which should be enough to kill any reaction. Unfortunately, Chernobyl's control rods were tipped with graphite. This made the reaction spike even further to cataclysmic levels. The water coolant flashed into steam, the reaction sped up more, steam increased temperature, the reaction sped up, and this continued. Pressure built in the reactor until it exploded. We all know the rest. Radiation, poor government response, death, suffering, decay, loss, tragedy. I hope you learned something new, and if you didn't, then it's okay. I still love you. Good night, everyone. Sleep well.